Good morning. Today we'll be doing autoimmunity and immunodeficiency. But prior to going to the topic of autoimmunity and immunodeficiency, I like to do a very brief summary of the immune system in a way in which we didn't study earlier. Secondly, I like also to take up certain points of the immune system, which in my previous class, somehow I didn't touch up or brush up. So now let's look into this picture. The picture on the left side is about the three phases of host defense. If we look into the three phases of host defense, now phase 1 represents the pre-existing body barriers. Phase 1 represents the pre-existing body barriers that work in a constant passive way to prevent invaders from gaining a strong hold within the body. So the phase 1, as you can see, lasts for 0 to 4 hours. Now it is during the phase 2, that is 4 to 96 hours, that the innate immune system cells first begin the active fight against the infection by employing mechanisms such as inflammation, phagocytosis, and complement activation. Now, when these mechanisms are roped in, they induce broad specific defenses that kill pathogens and recruits other immunocompetent cells to the site of the damage. So it's after 4 days, B and T lymphocytes that uniquely recognize a particular pathogen are called into action by the adaptive response. So as you can see, from the initial to the first 4 days, from 0 to 4 days, is usually the innate immunity and the cells of the innate immunity. From 4th day or 4 days onwards, the B and the T lymphocytes are roped in. After this point, it becomes a primary response because the host has now encountered the particular invader. Because the host has not encountered a particular invader before. So this is a primary response. Effector T cells and specific antibodies are produced, and now the whole immune system aggressively works to eliminate the pathogen. However, upon future infection of the same pathogen, memory B and memory T cell lymphocytes remaining in the body after the primary exposure are induced to response as early as 24 to 72 hours after second infection. So phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 in a nutshell describes the three phases through which the body's immune system moves when the body is exposed to a particular pathogen. For a primary response, the three phases, as I said, goes from 0 to 4 to 96 and above 96 hours. But if it's a secondary infection, it's a secondary immune response, that is, if the pathogen is encountered twice, if the same pathogen is encountered twice, what happens? Then, since there are memory effector cells of the adaptive immunity, in the second time, they recognize the pathogen very quickly, and the immune response takes place within 24 to 72 hours. If I look into the nearby picture, this picture is almost a similar picture. This is a similar picture that just now I described here, that this is the pathogen entry, and the pathogen actually activates the innate immunity in the first case, and the innate immunity retorts. So we have a non-specific control followed by a broadly specific control. Keep in mind that the innate immunity also have cells. Then further, the innate immunity now gradually ropes in the adaptive immunity, and the adaptive immunity has the two branches, the humoral and the cell-mediated, and a highly specific control system develops. This is a beautiful flow diagram highlighting the adaptive and the innate immunity. If we look into the innate immunity, the main players are the natural killer cells, phagocytes, granulocytes, and the complement proteins. In fact, they pick up the pathogen at the very early stage. Now, if you look at the players of the humoral immunity, we have the B lymphocyte, and the cell-mediated immunity, we have the T lymphocytes. It's very interesting to see that the CD4 helper cells do play a pivotal role. So it controls the activation of B lymphocytes on one hand and the activation of the T cytotoxic cells on the other hand if the antigen is a thymus dependent antigen. So if it's a thymus dependent antigen, the T lymphocytes do play a very big pivotal role, and depending on the cytokine milieu or the cytokine microenvironment at that point, the further cascade moves on. So in either case, if the CD4 cells activate the B lymphocytes, the cascade moves on to produce antibodies, and the antibodies may act as opsonins. They may help in the classical pathway of complement lysis, and the antibodies also act as opsonins for the natural killer cells. So we can see that it's antibody-dependent cell-mediated cytotoxicity. Now, when the IG, I mean to say the immunoglobulin molecules act as opsonins, macrophages can, they in fact attract the macrophages. So as you can see, so roping in the innate immunity. Not only that, the macrophages further activate the granulocytes. We have further degranulation and phagocytosis. The complement proteins can also act as opsonins. So this is how the adaptive and the innate immunity, even though they have a separate set of cell lineages within them, but yet are intertwined when the immune system actually starts functioning in its full form. Moving on further to the next slide, I'd like to now name some famous scientists who received the Nobel Prize for Immunology, because we need to know the name of these persons. So in 1901, it was Emil von Behring. He discovered the antitoxins and the serum therapy and its application for diphtheria. In 1905, it was Robert Koch for his investigations and discoveries regarding tuberculosis. Koch developed tuberculin reactivity tests that became very important for a current understanding of cellular immunity. 1908, Elie Mechnikov for his discovery of phagocytosis, and Paul Ehrlich for his work on fundamental immunology. 1913, Charles Robert Rickett for his discovery of anaphylaxis. 1919, Jules Bordet for his studies regarding immunology, particularly complement-mediated lysis. 1930, Karl Landsteiner for his discovery of the human blood group. So this name is very famous to you all. You have studied that experiment in undergraduates. 1951, Max Thieler for the development of vaccines against yellow fever. 1957, Daniel Bovet for his development of antihistamines in the treatment of allergy. This was a hallmark experiment, and this experiment helped to develop the medical field a huge amount. 1960, Frank McFarlane Brunet and Peter Brian Medawar for the discovery of acquired immunological tolerance. 1917, Gerald Morris Edelman and Rodney Robert Porter for the discoveries concerning the chemical structure of antibodies. 1977, Rosalind Yalow for the development of radioimmunoassay. 1980, John Ducey, George Davis Nail, and Baruch Benacerraf for his discovery of the histocompatibility antigens on humans and animal cells and their role in tissue and blood transplantation rejection. For this, Dose and Snail got the prize, and for the work on the genetic control of immune response, Benasarev got the prize. 1984, George J.F. Kohler and Cesar Milston for the development of cell hybridization as a technique to produce monoclonal antibodies, and Niels K. Jerne for his many fundamental contributions to theoretical immunology. 1987, Susumu Tonegawa for his work on the immunoglobulin genes and the mechanism by which antibody diversity is generated. 1990, Joseph E. Mori and E. Donald Thomas for their work on organ and bone marrow transplantation. 1996, Peter C. Doherty and Rolf M. Zinkernagel for the discovery of the MAC restriction of T-cell responses. 1997, Stanley B. Prusiner for his discovery of prions, a new biological principle of infection. 2008, Francios Barré-Sinosi and Luc Montagnier for the discovery of human immunodeficiency virus. And finally, I'd stop here, 2011, Ralph M. Steinman for his discovery of the dendritic cell and its role in adaptive immunity, and Bruce A. Butler and Jules A. Hoffman for the discovery concerning the activation of innate immunity. So these Nobels were actually given for immunology. So I thought of mentioning these names because these are some famous works. Some names are known to you while some names are not known to you. So now we are moving on to the next part of our slide. So this is another picture depicting the innate and the adaptive immunity. And as you can see by the time lag, the innate immunity starts out at the onset, and then it is followed by the adaptive immunity. And these are some very simple comparisons of innate and adaptive immunity. So I'm not getting into the comparison right now. You're well aware of what is the basic differences of innate and adaptive immunity. Now we move to another important topic, the active and the passive immunity, because I have brought this picture out here because we are passing through a very peculiar phase of the world's history. So we are passing through the COVID phase, and you've heard about plasma therapy. Okay, so now when we think of immunotherapy or we think of immune vaccine strategies, immunity can be developed in two ways. One is the active immunity and the other is the passive immunity. In active immunity, the microbial antigens, so part of the microbe is used as a vaccine to create an infection, and after days or weeks, the immune cells develops and against the against the induced antigen that was provided in the body. And ultimately, the immune cell is capable of accepting the infection challenge and doing away with the infection challenge and recovery. Now, this is active immunity. What is passive immunity? Passive immunity is that a person who has already been infected with this pathogen, the serum from their blood is collected. And this serum is assumed that bears soluble antibodies specific for this antigen. This serum is now administered to an infected person, assuming the fact that these antibodies, which are specific for this pathogen, will now be entering the body of this individual, and automatically, without any infection, the individual is gaining basic immunity against this particular immune challenge and recovery immunity. And this is a picture of how and what kind of antigens are recognized by the receptors of the innate and the adaptive immunity. The innate immunity recognize receptors. The innate immunity have receptors which recognize particular molecular patterns on pathogens, while the adaptive immunity receptors recognizes particular surface antigens which acts as epitope. So There are receptors for the adaptive immunity as well as innate immunity. The difference is that the recognition molecules are different for the innate immunity and the adaptive immunity. The innate immunity recognizes the molecular patterns. The adaptive immunity recognizes specific epitopes, antigenic epitopes. Now, this is a structure of hematopoiesis. That is how our immune cells have developed. If you look into this particular picture, this is a big picture, so you need to concentrate. This is a stem cell. And from the stem cell, we have two common multipotent progenitors, depending on the cytokines that are liberated at the given moment. Now, we have a common lymphoid progenitor by the process of lymphosis, or a common myeloid progenitor by the process of myelopoiesis. From the common lymphoid progenitor, as you can see, as the picture depicts, that we have committed precursors. Now, here I'd just like to say that here SCF means stem cell factor, FLT3 ligand. FLT3 ligand. This is the pull from FLT3 ligand. This is interleukin 6. So we have a common lymphoid progenitor and a common myeloid progenitor. From the common myeloid progenitor, we are having another two different progenitors. One that gives the output cells of erythrocyte, platelet, and basophils. The other giving the output cells of these category. Now, if you look into these two common progenitors, the common myeloid progenitor, again depending on the cytokine milieu, divides into two multipotent progenitor, and this multipotent progenitor gives rise to two committed precursors depending on the FT3L ligand or the G granular colony stimulating factor, granulocyte colony stimulating factor. It gives rise to two committed precursors of this one. So we have this committed precursor. This further gives rise to another committed precursor. So when this committed precursor in presence of monocyte colony stimulating factor develops into a monocyte, and in presence of the FLT3 ligand develops into a pre-dendritic cell and then a dendritic cell. So the origin of both the monocyte and the dendritic cells were initially a pre-dendrocytic common precursor, which further divided, which further got separated by this cytokine to give a dendritic precursor, giving rise to a dendritic cell. Let's look into this multipotent progenitors. We have some common committed precursors here, giving rise to erythrocytes, giving rise to platelet, and we have another common precursor giving rise to basophil. Now, if you look into this particular cell, this is in presence of interleukin 5, the myeloid progenitor develops into a committed precursor, which gives rise to a basophil. So initially, it seems that the basophil, eosinophil, and the neutrophil, even though the names, I mean to say, rhymes, they do not come together. They do not come from the same committed precursor. And the cytokines, there are definite cytokines which differentiate the committed precursors to give rise to eosinophil, basophil, and neutrophil. The common lymphoid progenitor has not been shown here, so I have brought up this picture. So you have this common lymphoid progenitor. There are two main primary lymphoid organs, the bone marrow and the thymus. And within the bone marrow, the lymphocytes develop to give rise to the B lymphocytes, and the lymphocytes develop to give rise to the T lymphocytes. Now, let me see here something. This picture is a very simplified picture. So when I'll be going into the next slide, I'll tell you that the lymphoid cells do not only give rise to the B and the T lymphocytes. It gives rise to the natural killer cells. It gives rise to the natural killer T cells. And we're talking about T cells. When we have a common lymphoid progenitor, there are two categories of T cells that comes from that lymphoid progenitor. The alpha beta T cells and the gamma delta T cells. Coming down to this picture, this is the picture from the monocyte dendritic cell precursor. From the monocyte dendritic cell precursor, this one. we are getting the monoblast and the common, as I was telling you, the origin of the common dendritic cell precursor. From the common dendritic cell precursor, we are getting two kinds of dendritic cells, the conventional dendritic cell and the plasmacytoid dendritic cell. And from the monocytes, we are getting the activated macrophages, and from this particular precursor only we get the residential macrophages also. These macrophages, when differentiate and reside in tissues, gives rise to the residential macrophages. So from the monocytes, I mean to say from this particular common lymphoid common progenitor that developed from the myeloid progenitor, we are getting the activated macrophages, we are getting the different, I mean to say residential macrophages, and we are getting the conventional dendritic cells as well as the plasmacytoid dendritic cells. Now moving on to this is a very simplified picture, but it shows all these cells that are obtained from the lymphocyte precursors. So we have a common lymphoid progenitor, and as I said, it gives rise to lymphocytes. So we have the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes. We have the natural killer cells. We have the natural killer T cells. Now, this is something which I did not mention in my first class. And we have the lymphoid dendritic cells. So we have certain macrophages developing also from the lymphoid precursors. If you look into the common myeloid precursor, we have the neutrophils, we have the eosinophil, basophil, monocyte, megakaryocytes, erythrocytes, myeloid dendritic cells, and mast cells. Now, coming to the cell types I now just mentioned, that the the natural killer cells, NKT cells, these are two cells of which we had not heard before, right? So we'll start with these two cells that regarding their importance. So what is the difference between the natural killer cells, the NKT cells? Now let me tell you that you had studied the T cells are of the alpha beta category and the gamma delta category. So I'm just giving a very brief difference between the NK cells, the NKT cells, and the gamma delta cells. Now the NK cells, the NKT cells, and the gamma delta T cells of the lymphoid progeny are considered to bridge the gap between the innate and the adaptive response. NK cell activation is controlled by a balance of signaling by activatory and inhibitory receptors, and is often triggered by a relative deficit of self-MHC class 1 molecule. That is, NK cells kills virus-infected and tumor cells by ADCC or perforin granzyme-mediated cytotoxicity. Now coming to the gamma delta T cells, because we have heard about them a little low. The gamma delta T cells reside in the mucosal and the cutaneous epithelia. The gamma delta T cell receptors bind to non-peptide pathogen and stress antigens that are recognized directly or when presented on CD1C or MHC class 1B. Activated gamma delta T cells generate cytotoxic T lymphocytes that kill infected target cells by perforin granzyme mediated cytotoxicity, as well as they secrete T helper affected cytokines. So you can see by functionally gamma delta T cells are very similar to the NK cells, because the NK cells also killed by the perforin granzyme mediated cytotoxicity. So do the gamma delta T cells. Now coming to the NKT cells. The NKT cells bear a semi-variant TCR alpha beta that recognizes glycolipid and lipid ligands present on CD1D by antigen presenting cells. Activated NK T cells rapidly secrete chemokines and cytokines that enhance anti-pathogen and anti-tumor immune response while suppressing autoreactivity. NK T cells promote T helper 1, T helper 2, and T helper 17 differentiation and NK cell function. NK T cell is a mixture of NK cell and the alpha beta T cells, even though they do not recognize the classical class 1 and the class 2 MHC molecules. So these we'll be doing these three cells, the NKT cells, the gamma delta cells, and the natural killer cells later on. But at the very outset, I just gave you the basic difference between the NK cells, the gamma delta T cells, and the NKT cells. Now this picture, the next picture is a critical one. I'm not getting into the details of this picture. Actually, this picture shows that from a single hematopoietic stem cells, given what cytokine is present in the microenvironment or what is the mitotic signal the cell is actually receiving, depending on that, we are getting a huge repertoire of the different immune cells that develop from a single hematopoietic stem cell.